Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here for our Board of Directors agenda meeting, where we set the agenda for our meeting on October 16th. We can go ahead and get right to it. We've got several proclamations to issue today, and so without delay, I'm going to go ahead and take care of these all at once. The first proclamation is to recognize this month as Arts and Humanities Month, and it reads as follows. Know you all people by these present greetings, whereas Little Rock has long officially recognized the importance of culture and through initiatives such as the municipal auditoriums, the zoo, our museums and a library, the repertory theater, and whereas since the 1830s the city of Little Rock has been a supporter of institutions presenting visual arts, theater, dance, music, and sculpture, as well as libraries and those commemorating our heritage through historic preservation of structures, as well as museums which tell our stories through exhibits and outreach efforts. And whereas the Little Rock Arts and Culture Commission is composed of private citizens and cultural institution leaders and is charged with promoting policies and encouraging endeavors for the appreciation and enhancement of the arts and cultural resources here in our city. And whereas the year of 2018 has been one of extreme excitement and profound sadness in Little Rock's cultural scene, which combined have served to galvanize Little Rock's cultural supporters. And whereas Little Rock citizens have applauded the plans of the Arkansas Arts Center expansion and the renovations of the MacArthur Museum of Arkansas Military History, and they have rallied to ensure that the Arkansas Repertory Theater reopens in early 2019 while mourning the passing of Little Rock's cultural icons such as Ron Robinson, Dr. David Belcher, and the Arkansas Repertory Theater founder Cliff Fannin Baker. And whereas for 26 years, October has been designated as Arts and Humanities Month on the national, regional, state, and local level. Now, therefore, I, Mark Stodela, Mayor of the City of Little Rock, Arkansas, do hereby proclaim October 2018 as Arts and Humanities Month here in the City of Little Rock and call upon our citizens to celebrate our cultural life, to remember the contributions of those cultural leaders who have left us, and to participate in the arts and humanities which enrich our lives, educate our children, and encourage growth in our economy. In witness thereof, I have hereunto set my hand and seal on this 9th day of October 2018. And I believe that Jim Doyle with our Arts and Humanities, Arts and Cultural Commission is here to accept. Thank you, Jim, and thank you for all your service.
Thank you.
That you have given us to the commission.
Thank you.
I think he wants to take a picture.
Sure.
And I also have one to present to Ruth Shepard, the Executive Director of the Arkansas Rep.
Well, not executive director.
Well,
I tell
the
people
boss at the moment.
they can call me the queen.
The Queen, okay. Queen Shepard.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. It's good to see you. The next proclamation deals with something that we board members talk about a lot, particularly Director Compuris. And he's going, uh-oh, what's happening now? But this proclamation reads as follows. Know ye all people by these presents and greetings. Whereas the infrastructure that brings water to and from homes and businesses is essential to the quality of life and the economic vitality of Little Rock. And whereas Americans on average utilize 260 gallons of water per household per day. And whereas Central Arkansas Water maintains 2,500 miles of pipe and serves over 450,000 people. And whereas water crises throughout the country, ranging from contaminated water to drought to flooding, show the severe impacts of what can happen to the public health and well-being of a community without access to clean drinking water. And whereas droughts and flooding and other weather-related challenges put pressure on water systems that are ill-equipped and ill-prepared to manage such extreme events. And whereas utilities nationwide are grappling with aging infrastructure and lack of reliable revenue and funding sources to maintain systems, let alone upgrade their systems, and whereas 1/5 of the U.S. economy would grind to a halt without a reliable and clean sources of water, And whereas investing in our drinking water systems will secure a bright and prosperous future for generations to come, whereas innovations in water conservation and water reuse will drive job growth, economic development, and establish a 21st century paradigm of water management in the United States. And whereas different regions face different water challenges, so the solutions to strengths to our drinking water and wastewater systems must be locally driven. But reinvestment in our water must be a national priority. And finally, whereas water is essential to the quality of life and economic competitiveness, and acknowledge the importance of educating the public about the value of water through the Imagine a Day Without Water campaign. Now, therefore, I, Mark Stodola, Mayor of the City of Little Rock, Arkansas, do hereby proclaim October 10th, 2018, as the Imagine a Day Without Water Day in the City of Little Rock. The City of Little Rock is dedicated to investing in safe and reliable water infrastructure and calls upon our federal partners to bring much-needed funding and innovation to protect and restore our critical water infrastructure. In witness thereof, I have hereunto set my hand and seal on this 9th day of October 2018. And I believe our CAW representatives are here. And the Commissioner, Doug Shackelford. Is that right? Hi, how are you?
Good.
Good to see you.
Too.
Come on, if you want to say something
Oh, sure.
about the day
Absolutely.
tomorrow.
Mayor, council members, thank you so much for having us here today and for recognizing this important day. We celebrate this year, each year just in an attempt to bring awareness to the value of water. Obviously, we are very blessed here in Central Arkansas to have some of the very best water in the country, and we're very proud of the fact that we have that and we're able to put the work in to ensure that our citizens have fantastic water. But as was said in the proclamation, there's work to be done to continue that fantastic quality of water and quality of life that we enjoy here in Little Rock. So we certainly appreciate you recognizing us with this proclamation and appreciate all the support you've provided to Central Arkansas Water over the years. Thank you.
Our final proclamation deals with something obviously also very critical to our city. And it is a proclamation that reads as follows: Know ye all people by these present greetings. Whereas change is constant and affects all cities, towns, suburbs, counties, boroughs, townships, and rural areas. And whereas community planning and plans can help manage this change in a way that provides better choices for how people work and live. And whereas community planning provides an opportunity for all residents to be meaningfully involved in making choices that determine the future of their community. And whereas the full benefits of planning requires public officials and citizens who understand, support, and demand excellence in planning and plan implementation. And whereas the month of October is designated as National Community Planning Month throughout the United States and its territories, and whereas the American Planning Association and its professional institute, the American Institute of Certified Planners, endorse National Community Planning Month as an opportunity to highlight the contributions of sound planning and plan implementation and to make the quality of our settlements and environments better. And whereas the celebration of National Community Planning Month gives us the opportunity to publicly recognize the participation and the dedication of the members of the planning commissions and other citizen planners who have contributed their time and their expertise to the improvement of the city of Little Rock. And finally, whereas we recognize the many valuable contributions made by professional community and regional planners in the city of Little Rock, Arkansas, and extend our heartfelt thanks for their continued commitment to public service by these professionals. Now, therefore, I, Mark Stodola, Mayor of the City of Little Rock, Arkansas, do hereby proclaim October 2018 as Community Planning Month here in the City of Little Rock. In witness thereof, I have hereunto set my hand and seal on this 9th day of October 2018. And I believe we have some people, Jamie Collins, our Director of Planning, with us. Jamie, thanks for all you and your staff do to help us make sound decisions on the development of our city. Did you say something?
Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the board, and I reiterate that staff thanks everybody, both at the board level and all of our commissions, with their opinions and their assistance. and help in all of our planning efforts. And we also appreciate the citizens, as they said in here, because it takes a community to do planning. So thank you very much.
Okay, we can now move on to our agenda, the proposed consent agenda, items 1 through 10, and let me ask if there are any board members. First of all, let me deal with the additions. We have an M1 resolution dealing with the extension of sewer services outside the city limits with a pre-annexation agreement. Is there questions? Yes, Director Adcock.
Like a presentation on this, please, and I also would like to have an update on our extraterritorial study that we're doing, Mr. Moore.
Director Adcock, it was presented to me to look into a possible extension of sewer services for Rusty Tracker's Vineyards, which is a project that is to be developed just outside the city limits. They're not immediately contiguous to the city limits, and so they cannot annex at this time, but they're willing to do so. The reason it's on here for this one is that there's some grant funds that are going to be available for this project, but the basic work has to be in place about going forward before the end of October, and this is the last meeting we could do that. We got together with the Water Reclamation Commission and got a copy of the last pre-annexation agreement we could find. The resolution is here to allow this, so this would be on the 16th. I think you've got, or I know we sent down the one-page resolution, which is probably going to be expanded, and then there's a description of the properties behind that, which is going to be incorporated. And before Tuesday, we'll have a copy of the draft pre-annexation agreement with it also. It won't be executed, but it'll be there.
When are we going to see the pictures from Mr. Scott back there on this? Where is this located? And why are we skipping over property that has not been our practice in the past?
I think, Mayor?
Well, I was contacted by Doug Meyer about this, and he has, I'm not sure, Tom, that's accurate about it not being contiguous. I believe that it is. The purpose of, he's always wanted to annex, but there's some grant money that will help to develop this commercial vineyard, which is, I believe, out, I want to say Burlingame Road, but I'm not, is that not correct? David O'Dodd, okay, David O'Dodd. And so he would like to go after those grant funds that would not apply if the property is already annexed into the city. So he's totally willing to annex the property, would have annexed it already, but he would like to apply for those grant funds, which is why he would like to be able to sign the pre-annexation agreement. We've done these in the past. The last one was done in 2008. This has been discussed with the Water Reclamation Commission, and they are with the staff of the Water Reclamation Commission, and I believe they are, Tom, you talked with Gene Block, is that correct?
Yes.
And they're okay with this, they're fine with this, so they have no objection?
I communicated with Ms. Block, who's the legal counsel for the commission, and I got an email yesterday indicating that the commission's going to try to hold a meeting between now and Tuesday to make this official.
Have they met with any of the neighborhood associations in that area?
I don't have an answer to that. We certainly can have Mr. Meyer here.
And just a reminder, it was earlier this year, Jamie, that this item came before the board and the board approved it in its current form. So the board's, it was duly noted or notified during our normal procedures,
But we approved the venues. We did not approve extending our sewer, right?
correct. And that's what this action would do.
This is just extending the sewer.
Correct.
But that is something that we have not done outside of our area because we've held that very strictly to the fact that you have to be in the city limits of Little Rock to have our sewer.
I believe I'm aware of one, I'm not sure which the one in 2008, but there was one in the early 2000s that we did.
English Acres?
I think we're dealing with the church.
Yeah,
I'd
we
like
did
to move this
these.
separate, please.
These pre-annexation agreements actually were done back in the late 80s. I actually drafted the agreement. It's been used at various times by Water and Sewer, a long time in the past, but most recently, I think, is the one in 2008. Are there other questions about this? Director Adcock wants it held separately. We can do that.
Thought about that.
Okay, let's see. Director Wyrick is next, please.
Thank you. I was going to bring up that this was an area that we passed an ordinance for this to be an event center a few months back. Mr. Meyer owns some land back there with a vineyard on it, and he has some plans for that. And then he owns 2 or 3 houses along David O'Dodd Road. And then across the street is a subdivision that we have, and I can't think of the name of the subdivision, but I know across the road, which would be east of him, is within the city limits. I'm just not clear whether he is in the city limits. But I mean, if you're talking about contiguous, then, you know, if you have David O'Dodd that's in the middle of the property or between the 2 properties, would that not be considered contiguous?
Yeah, Mr. Collins has come forward. I think we determined it is contiguous.
Yeah.
Director Wyrick, the question, there is a section of property between David O'Dodd and the planned development commercial that was approved prior to this year that was not part of that application. And essentially is the houses
Okay.
that are along David O'Dodd. The city limits goes to the west side of David O'Dodd, so they are abutting those homes, those tracts.
Okay.
So it would be how the pre-annexation agreement was written, but that land would be, contiguous to that property, the land that Mr. Meyer owns.
Okay, because we have like Sienna Lakes that's back in there, and they're within the city limits, I believe. So I'm thinking that they should be abutting the city limits if they're not already.
Mr. Myers, he owns, because of those other tracts for those homes, I don't know exactly how it's broke out right here, looking at it, but the property they owns, which goes up to Rusty Tractor, and then David O'Dodd is the boundary on the east, his entire tract is abutting or adjacent to the city limits.
That's what I was thinking. Okay, do you know how many acres that he's wanting to do with this? I looked at the resolution, but I don't think I saw that.
That I do not know. I have not seen the annexation that
Okay.
Tom drafted it. Is it an entire parcel or just including the home? No?
I believe it's
don't
the
know.
entire parcel.
Okay, so we'll know that by Tuesday or before Tuesday of next week?
Yes, that was the description I wanted to put into the resolution itself. If the one that was supposed to have been handed out has 2 pages that show the plat of where the property actually is. Did you get this?
No, I don't have that. Does anybody else have it? No, I don't think we've got it. That would be helpful if we had that. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
It's on the link.
It, and I can't tell you that it's on the link because that's beyond my skill set, but we will get this to you. Do you need it before Friday with the pony? There it is. Can somebody make copies of it tonight? Yes.
Okay, are there other questions on the consent agenda, items 1 through 10? Yes, Director Wyrick. ahead,
Can
please.
someone do, thank you. Well, that's setting the date for a public hearing, so I guess I can wait on that. If we have any information about what's happening at 7718 Henderson Road, I'd like to have it. I realize it's setting the date for a public hearing on November the 4th, so that's all I had on that. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Moore, could you give a briefing on Resolution 6, please?
Mayor, members of the board, this is to enter into a contract with JCI Construction for part of our Arkansas River Trail Riverfront Drive project. Let me ask Mr. Eckert, our Parks Director, to come forward.
Dr. Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the board. This is a part of a grant project that was approved about a year and a half, 2 years ago. I think it's a TAP grant. It was before my time here, but it was basically connecting the trail that goes behind Junior Deputy and making a safe transition into the bike lanes on Riverfront Drive.
Junior Deputy Park.
Yes,
Do you have the,
Junior Deputy Park down.
can you, I don't see, is the design on that attached?
I do not know if it's attached or not, but I can provide that to you.
Would you provide that to all of us? please?
Definitely. And it includes a hawk signal, which will alert vehicles to when pedestrians are in the vicinity, and it'll flash and should allow safe crossing.
Okay, if you'll just provide that, that'd be great. Thank you.
No problem.
Okay. Anything else on any of these other items? Mr. Eckert, I believe Director Hendricks wants to ask a question.
Okay, I want to ask you, is it any particular ward that this is going to service?
This is part of the Arkansas River Trail, so it spans from,
It abuts what?
what ward
What
would that be in?
wards?
It's in Ward 3.
Only?
Yes, ma'am, that's part of, but it's part of the Arkansas River Trail, which spans several wards, I believe.
You said several.
It does.
Ward 1, Ward
Our
3.
River Trail, it's 1, 3,
Yeah, that's what I want to know. 1, 3, what? Okay.
4, 5.
Okay, well, say so. Thank you, young
Right,
man.
sorry, I
Thank
need to.
Okay, anything else on items 1 through 10?
Mayor and members of the board, I will just point out, and I passed the highlights out on item 10. This is renewing our health care for 2019. We're pleased to report that we had no increase in our expenditure in this line item, very similar benefits for our employees.
And Mayor,
Mr. Moore, I think, did you mention at one time to me, I thought that the deductible might be reduced as a matter of fact, or is that not correct?
That's not correct. We had two bids.
Same deductible?
Right.
Mayor and members of the board, for your information on number 10, and I'll try to remember and make this Tuesday night, even though one of the members of the board is probably eligible to get insurance proceeds as a result of number 10, he is not an owner of the business, does not have a 10% interest in it, and therefore is not disqualified from voting on this issue. And that was Director Adcock, Director Compuris can't know.
You're going to have to speak up, Mr. Carpenter. I don't think half of us heard that.
On number 10, which is the health insurance thing, Dr. Compuris is a possible recipient of insurance payments, but he does not have an ownership in United Healthcare. He is not an officer, and therefore he is not disqualified under the Code of Ethics from voting on this. I will try to remember to make this comment again on Tuesday night for the official record, but it needed to be made.
Okay, thank you. Okay, if there are no other questions on items 1 through 10, we can move to the planning and development items, 11 through 13. And Director Adcock, you're recognized, please.
Mr. Moore, I'd like some more information on number 11 and number 14, please.
Number 11 is a simple name change, Mr. Collins, and come forward.
Scott, if you could bring up, the, probably the zoning, that would kind of show a better area. What this, Director Adcock, Public Works asked, presented application to rename a section of the street to actually just one name. What it is, there's 6 properties along this street just west of Rodney Parham that had different addresses. 2 of them had, that was front of the street, had the West 5th Street, and then 2 of them also had the West Capitol Street. And so what this does is the renaming is we're going to rename this West Capitol so that they're all the same address along the streets. And this is for confusion and also emergency services so that we don't have 2, 3, or 4 that are different addresses along the same street.
Okay, thank you.
Is that actually an extension of West Capitol Avenue? Is that how you made that determination?
Yes, there's and that's what it was. It was because there's others that had that West Capitol address, and so we went out also into a public meeting. Staff did to get the opinions of the ones that were affected of what they wanted the name to be, and so the staff settled on that West Capitol Avenue.
Okay, thank you. Director Wright, you're recognized, please.
Okay, that is Ward 6, so I wasn't aware that you all had went out to talk to the residents. I was aware of the name, and it was confusing. So I'm glad to see that it has been changed, but it just seems strange to have a West Capitol this far over. That was my only thing. It just seems strange because I think of Capitol as being downtown, and I think a lot of people will as well. Because when I first saw that, I said, "You sure that's Ward 6?" But I know that area, so I know what you're talking about, and it was confusing, but.
And they did get signature support.
So
were
they are
submitted.
supportive,
They're
okay,
supportive of it
so-
on both sides of the street, and then we also sent out to Sunnymead and Briarwood Neighborhood Associations.
Okay. If they're okay with it, I'm okay with it. Thank you.
And Director Adcock, you said item 14? Okay. Well, that's,
Public Works.
That's, past that. So here's a copy of the revised ordinance, and I'm going to ask Mr. Honeywell to come forward and go over the penalty part.
Yeah, rusty tractor. Yes.
Director Adcock, was there a particular item you had a question about, or did you just, excuse me, I'm sorry. Okay. What we did is we went back and looked at those penalties associated with not getting the work done within the allowed days for the minor and major street cut work, and we've changed that to $100 a day in a penalty for those. $50 a day. Well, one of the things to keep in mind is a lot of these utility companies take out hundreds, if not 1,000 permits a year. So if they get behind on 100 permits, every one of those is getting charged $100 a day. Every day they're not getting it fixed. So the penalty can get very large very rapidly if they're not doing their work in the timely manner that they're supposed to be doing it. It's not that one permit doesn't cover all the work they're doing. Each individual work item that they're doing has to have its own permit. So that means every one of those permits is eligible to have this $100 a day penalty attached to it.
And I think it's also important that when we're talking about this is a time frame penalty. The major projects have 60 days to complete, and it's when, if they haven't completed that permit, is when we go out and inspect. And so it's not so much the fact that they didn't follow the ordinance or it didn't look good. It really is the first initial is the timeframe. And there's language in there, as the board would know, that deals with weather issues and so forth. So after going back and looking at it and then visiting with the staff, we felt like $100 was a reasonable amount to say, okay, you're going to finish this within a time frame. And again, it's a day.
Director Campuris, you're recognized, please.
Yes, ma'am.
John, walk us through this. Let's just say X utility gets a permit, and they have the permit says what?
It depends on if it's a major or a minor street cut. So let's just say it's a minor street cut, which means it's less than that 400 feet of continuous cut in the street. They have 35 days from the day that they're issued the permit to have that work completely done. That means it's been repaired to a finished status. At 35 days, if they've not completed that, we start charging them $100 a day. Then, if they get to 60 days and they still haven't repaired it, they've been getting charged that $100 a day for those 25 days. We have the right to go out and repair that street and bill them at a cost of $100 a square yard to repair it. Or if it costs more than $100 a square yard to fix it, if it's an unusual circumstance, we can bill them whatever it cost us to repair that, if it's greater than that $100 a square yard.
So let's just say that this occurs, and we go out, and after a certain period of time, we feel like their repair is not good enough. What happens then?
At that 35 days, or if it's before 35 days, if we go out and they tell us we finished this particular permitted location, we go out and inspect it, it's not repaired the way we want it to be repaired. We tell them that they have to go back and fix it the way we expect it to be repaired, per the standards that we have set forth. If it's still within that 35-day permitted period, there's no penalty to them at that point. But if it's beyond that 35 days, then we're charging them that $100 a day until it's fixed correctly.
And then if someone's pulling multiple permits all the time, and there's cuts all over, how many people do you have inspecting?
We have 3 people doing inspections around the city.
And is that enough?
With going to this where they have to, we have these time periods on the permits based on this, I believe that's going to make it a lot easier for us to cover all of the permits. Right now, we'll have a utility come in and take out multiple permits at once that we're trying to keep track of, and they may not start working on a lot of those permits for several months, if not longer. So we've got that in the system where we're going by and checking it, but there may not be any work going on, so that's taking up our staff's time doing that. With this, they can't take a permit out until they're going to do that work, or they're paying that penalty the whole time it's just sitting there. So even if they haven't cut the street, they pull a permit, don't do any work, 35 days later, they still haven't cut the street, we're charging them $100 a day after that 35 days, even if they haven't touched the street, because they've pulled a permit and we're going out and monitoring that job site. So there's some incentive to get the work done within the time frame of the permit.
And how are we establishing what we're telling? I presume X utility has somebody that's doing the work for them. It's not part of their company usually.
If they're hiring a contractor to do their work for them, the utility companies are typically the ones that are pulling these permits, so they're the responsible party.
Right.
So
but how do we convey to whoever's repairing the quality that we demand?
We've given that to the utilities, and it's their responsibility to make sure their contractors are doing it right. And if their contractors don't do it right, the utility is the one that's responsible for paying those penalties and getting it repaired correctly. We can't do every subcontractor. That information is available, but we provide that to the general contractor or the utility that's getting it, it's their responsibility to provide it to the people that are working for them to get it repaired correctly.
Well, I'll look at this, but I still think we're undercharging the utilities. And I think that unless something has happened that I don't understand, I think the repair work that they do to our streets is not to the quality that any of us want. And I'm not sure how this takes care of that. What's your thought on that?
John, I think we need to talk about the new distance requirements that are in this that weren't included in our past ordinance. I think that's where
Sure,
we're going
I
to
mean,
see the major improvement.
Part of what we've done in changing how these permits are given or classified between a minor and a major repair, which a major repair requires half of the street or the lane that the cut's made in to be completely overlaid. Before you had the ability to go up right up to 400 feet, stop, make a space, and start again. That's where you end up a lot of these very small, narrow cuts that are difficult to repair for long distances. We've eliminated that ability to do that, or at least we feel like we've eliminated that ability because of the way we've classified the spacing that you're allowed to do when it's considered a continuous cut, which requires you to do that overlay the whole way. So overlaying the entire street versus a narrow cut, you get a better result.
Right, but in the minor repair, they have the same criteria today that we're going to have in this ordinance.
Yes, sir.
Then why do we have such poor repairs now if we have the same criteria?
Part of that is you've got a multitude of different people doing the repairs. Part of that is right now the way they're able to do these cuts with no time frame, no penalties associated with how long they can have the permit to do it. It's harder for our inspectors to be there on site when they're doing this work. So we're typically going after the fact, after they've done the repair, to approve that repair. With the new model that we have, where we know they've only got a certain amount of time, we should be able to get there, inspect that, and probably have a better handle on when they're doing the work and making sure they're doing the right work correctly when they're actually doing it versus chasing around the city to find where they're doing the repairs.
But again, our criteria hadn't changed. Is that right for what a repair should be?
No, it is not.
Then you think you have the staff and knowledge and manpower to make them do it right so that all of us don't get calls saying, you came and made a cut on my street and it looks like a four-letter word starting with H.
We'll make every effort we can to ensure that street cuts are repaired properly, but once again.
I know, but that goes back to my point about the penalty. If the penalty's so onerous, then I'm going to trust you and Bruce on this. But if the penalty is bad enough, then they're going to be more inclined to do it right the first time than the second time or the fifth time, and it's going to cut down on your manpower having to work, and that's my whole point.
The higher the penalty, you may get potentially get better response as far as how they do the construction to repair it. Our staff time is probably not going to be changed with a higher penalty. We still have to go out and look at every one of these locations and do all.
Well, I know, but the higher the penalty puts the onus on the utility or the whoever's doing it to tell their guys they're doing it right the first time. And my whole point to you now is they've got the criteria and they're not doing a good job. And I just want to make sure that y'all can tell me in a week that by this ordinance, we're not going to keep getting these phone calls about they're cutting my street, there's a minor repair, and I've got these humps or dips or they just poured asphalt in here and they hadn't stamped it down. And
well, one thing I do want to point out, you have a temporary repair and you have a final repair. We're going to get phone calls about temporary repairs.
I understand that.
I just want everybody to understand that
Temporary repairs just so you don't fall in there and ruin your tire.
right.
But I understand that. But a lot of permanent repairs, unfortunately, look to me like temporary repairs.
Don't disagree. We can do better with that, and I'll admit that.
So, John, are temporary repairs, are the final, let me back up. Are the final repairs supposed to be done within those limited time frames that you just gave us?
Yes, sir.
So it's not a temporary repair by then, it's a final repair?
Yeah, temporary repair is supposed to be done as soon as they're finished backfilling the trench. It should be temporarily covered with
But you're saying that the final repair has to be done within those established timelines? that are
35
in this
days for
ordinance?
minor and 60 days for major.
Okay. Second question. I know there was some discussion about withholding future permits until the work is done properly. Have we resolved that issue about whether or not we can do that? Was that addressed?
We
I
didn't.
mean,
feel
that's
like-
one way
we
to,
didn't-
that's one way to get it done right.
We didn't feel like we could do that, but that's more of the franchise.
Mr. Carpenter?
Mayor, I don't know the full answer to that question.
You don't know the full answer to that. Well, don't you think we should probably get an answer to that? Because I think
That was my suggestion.
that's an incentive that makes sure that these things will be done properly. I would really hope that we could do that. I think it's reasonable that when you ask, I don't think that's impairing utilities under the Federal Communications statutes federally to insist that the repair work that's done when they do cut the streets is done properly. But I'll let you research that and tell us whether we could do that or not. And then finally, do we get, I know you have do you have a written narrative on what the proper way to fix these curb cuts is to be?
We have design drawings and.
So
those
they
have
actually
directions.
get visual drawings of what it's supposed to look like. And is that happening now?
Yes, sir.
And they're just ignoring it or what?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, if they're getting design drawings and they're supposed to, and it's visually being shown to them how to do it, and they're not doing it, I mean, that's just, we've got to change that.
And I think that's what this ordinance does in a lot of ways, because the calls that you all are getting and that we are getting is, okay, they're just patching here, moving up the street a little bit, doing another patch, and this eliminates that. I mean, and that's one of the things that really made our streets look terrible. And they were circumventing the ordinance, and so that's why we tried to address it with the revised ordinance.
Mr. Carpenter, if you could have an answer to us on that, because I would be in favor of amending this ordinance to add that if it's possible legally for us to do that. I don't know if the rest of the board members agree or not, but we could at least consider it on Tuesday. Okay, there may be some other questions on this. Director Wright, you're next, please.
Mine is not a question, mine is a suggestion regarding the repair work. Why are we not adding a penalty phase to that if after 6 months this patch caves in, which is what it did on 36th Street? The quality of the work, that's the problem that I get complaints about. And, I don't have to tell my colleagues how much these streets cost.
Part of our problem right now is there is no penalty or time period in our current ordinance. So the street cuts we're talking about now we have no ability other than hounding those utilities to go back out and repair those.
Well, I understand that.
That-
I'm saying, can we not include in this a penalty for the quality of the work if after 6 months or a year that patch fails? There's a warranty on every kind of work. Even if it's just 30 days, you get a warranty. So if that patch fails, and what I mean fail, caves in, then I really think that we ought to be able to require them to go back and fix it to our standards. I understand my colleagues wanting to add penalty more to the other penalty phase, but the complaints come in after the patch fails.
I think having them go back and repair it is one thing having them pay a penalty for that failure, that's where I'd have to think
Well,
about
perhaps
that,
if they paid
how we come up with a number for that.
How much would it cost if we sent if we had to repair it, how much would it cost? That's the penalty, because we got to pay to do it, or they're going to come do it.
Right. I'll have to.
I mean, am I making any sense? Are you seeing what I'm saying?
I think the
Because
question
that's
is,
that's when my phone starts ringing.
what do we currently do if we have, I mean, how long is the patch supposed to be good for when they do these street cuts?
Should be for multiple years.
And if it's not, then what happens?
Nothing.
It either
Who goes out and repairs it?
Either we get them to fix it, or depending on the condition of it, or depending on who the utility is, we may end up having to fix it if we can't get a response out of that utility.
That's what I'm talking about. There ought to be a time frame in this where we can hold them accountable with a penalty for the cost to make that repair. Read it to me.
John was talking earlier about the penalty, what we can charge a company. John, we go back over that if we do the repair.
Well, that's related to if we've accepted what I think what they're referring
This
to.
is after the fact,
if we've
after
accepted
everything's
this
been
as
done.
being finally repaired, and 6 months later it fails for
It
some
fails.
reason.
That's when the phone starts ringing. So what are our remedies then? Why should we have to come back and fix it, which we will have to, because the citizens are not going to tolerate it? But there ought to be a penalty that we can level at that point.
I'll need to figure out.
Well, I'd like to
the
amend
best
this
way
to
to- I
add
mean, we
that
already have
to
a
it.
price for if we're going to do the repair work.
Hmm.
I just need to go back and think about warranty period, how long,
Yeah.
et cetera.
I would think at least a year, but it's supposed to last multiple years.
Well, I mean, if you look at our construction project, we do streets, that's a year maximum. is what we
Right, so
do.
that's what I'm
So
saying. Everything
beyond
has
that-
a warranty if it's 30 days or a year. So if we can at least do that, then that would give us some relief from having to come out of your budget with the money.
Sure,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Okay, Director Hendricks, you're recognized, please.
Thank you. I always normally support staff. And it bothers me when we sit here and cut up like we just did on John. I think he's following the rules. Bruce, is he following the rules? He has to be.
Director Hendricks, this is in a response, and we've had it a lot. We hear, you all hear it a lot, we hear it a lot. And so this was our attempt to try to revise the current ordinance to address those concerns. I think we'll go back and look at some type of, if we can impose some type of warranty period after we've signed off on their work. And then the bigger issue is what Tom says about, these companies have a franchise agreement with us, and he's just going to have to look at that from a standpoint of whether we can withhold permits.
That's not what I'm talking about. I think that if, as board members, if we've got those kind of complaints like what I just heard, why can't we meet with John or the administration and work out these things rather than sit up here wasting my time? Listening to a bunch of whatever. Thank you.
Director Wyrick, you're recognized, please.
Thank you. I always hate following doors because sometimes we're on the same page. My question or my comment had to do with the warranty. Once it's repaired, and then it's 6 months, a year, 2 years down the road. What kind of follow-up did we have from that? And I think you're going to check into that because sometimes the patches don't hold.
Sure.
And the other unfortunate thing is it's always our newer streets that we've got the patches on. And, people are really proud of their streets once they get done. And then whenever there's a cut on it, they're just incensed. Why do I have this, patch in my street? The question I had was, how do you know the difference between a temporary and a permanent patch? Because I know that comes into play sometimes. And how long can you have a temporary patch before you have a permanent patch?
It's typically the materials that are used. for a temporary versus a permanent patch. The permanent patch looks like smooth asphalt that matches the existing pavement surface.
Yeah.
The temporary is typically a cold, what they call a cold mix. It's a
Right.
rougher, more granular looking asphalt material is what they typically use.
So do they always do a temporary patch first and then come back and do the permanent patch? Is that
Almost
always?
almost always you'll see that because the timing of having a cut done and open and having the materials and the equipment to do an actual finished pavement surface, that's a lot of coordination. So typically they'll do that cut, do a temporary patch, and then have a separate contractor that comes in and does that final repair.
Okay. And did y'all go back and look at the highway department regs for street cuts and all that? Did you find out anything new from that? Any more
no.
hammers we can use?
No,
No? They're very strong.
they are.
Yeah. Are we as strong as they are?
They don't have the penalties associated with
They
the
just
work
won't
like
let
we
you do it, right?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah.
Their agreements as far as franchises are concerned, I think, are probably a little different than what we have.
Okay. All right. Well, I knew they were tough to work with. So, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Director Fortson, you're recognized, please.
You still will have no direct relationship with the subcontractors who are doing this work, will you, John?
Typically, no. Some do have their subcontractors pull a permit where they'll be the permit holder, but a majority of those permits are actually pulled by the utilities.
Well, and that, maybe if you increase the penalty on the utilities, they'll be more inclined to look after their agent. I know my only experience has not been favorable. We're talking so much, and what Tom's talking about is the curb cuts and the street cuts we're anticipating with the expansion of fiber optics, but there are also other people that cut up the streets, like the gas company, our own water and sewer. About 3 years ago, Director Webb and I got into a situation on West Markham where the gas company had installed a line and cut the street and dug up a lot of sidewalk and replaced it in a manner that made it look like it belonged in a third world country. And we got involved, and your department got involved, and what we wound up with was a case of utility company and the contractor doing this, and the contractor was out of state. They had trouble finding him, and my memory is that they finally, you got involved. I don't know whether we did the repairs or they finally had to get another contractor, but there was a prolonged mess trying to deal with that and a whole lot of avoiding responsibility. And I don't know whether this makes that any easier, but if the monetary penalty gets high enough, it'll get somebody's attention in the corporate world.
Yes, sir. And what this would allow us to do, they're getting that $100 a day where it's not repaired properly. So even if they've repaired it, that doesn't mean their time stop if it's repaired incorrectly. And on top of that, in that situation, we could have gone in under the new ordinance and charged them that $100 a square yard to fix that, which is a really high price for sidewalk. So there's an incentive there for them to get that repaired and done where they don't have that bill looming over them.
Okay, thank you. Director Adcock, you're recognized, please.
John, over in about the 7400 block of North Chico, we just finished that street. Now there's a little 4-room house there that the man is getting ready to rehab. He's been told that the sewer line is over on the other side of the street, and so he's looking to hire a plumber that can do a street cut. Now, can anyone do a street cut?
Yes, the plumber can do a street cut. They have to come get a permit, but since it's a brand new street, there are premiums involved that they have to pay on top of just the street cut fee. There's also premium since it's a brand new street, which elevates the cost of actually doing that street cut. We will encourage them to do a street bore there.
To do a what?
To bore underneath the street instead of cutting the surface of the street.
Well, that street has been done about 2 months, and
Yes,
now they're
ma'am.
talking about cutting across it.
In the ordinance on page, on page 12, it talks about premiums for cutting the street with its age of the street. You can see how that price is escalated the newer the street is. The older the street gets, the less that premium to cut the street. So it's an incentive to do something different besides cutting the street because of the cost associated with doing that.
The house has sat vacant for probably 10, 15 years, and now with the brand-new street, they want to mess it up. So,
Unfortunately, residentially, I don't know that there's a lot we can do for those individual service situations. We do try and work with the utility companies as much as possible, not only with resurfacing, but also with our new construction projects like Chico, to get them to do all of their relocation work prior to us resurfacing or building the road. That works a lot of the time. Unfortunately, there are instances where they come back and they have a project that comes up after we've finished our work. But we do everything we can to try to avoid that.
same man owns 2 lots next door to this little house, and he's wanting to build a couple of duplexes on it. So is there any way to make him do all this at one time and not piecemealing?
For us, if it's already zoned residential lots, I don't know that there's much that we can do. We can encourage them to do that all at one time. With sewer, it's a little harder because of you have to run sewer lines that gravity drain to the sewer main. So without knowing exactly where everything is out there, I don't know if they can combine those into one location and go across the street. That all depends on the grade and where they're trying to get to. Without knowing exactly if you can reduce the number of cuts, it's hard to say.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, is that it? Thank you, John.
You're welcome.
Okay, are there any questions about 15 or 16?
Mayor, on item 15, I'd just like to say, some of y'all were familiar with this when we merged the police retirement fund. This is merging fire. We worked very closely with the committee. We had a meeting that about 75 retired firefighters attended. They were overwhelmingly in support of the merger. So this board will cease to exist after you all vote next Tuesday. But I would say that the retired firefighters are very pleased with the process and the approach. This includes a one-time $250 increase. If you remember when we did the police, we did $150. But we also agreed to come back in 3 years, and Director Adcock helped chair that effort. So this includes that review for the retired firefighters, that we would come back in 3 years and look at any potential benefit increases then also.
Okay, very good. Any other questions about the agenda? Okay. Thank you all very much. Oh, excuse me, Director Hendricks, go ahead.
Mr. Moore, I wanted to ask you, I got a call from some residents in the Central High area about a grant that was given the first of this year from Congressman French Hill and Tom Cotton. Can you look that up for me to see what it is? The Central High Neighborhood Association asked me about it. You may recall those 7 houses that has been approved for restoration across from Central High.
Sure. I think that was actually done in around the 60th anniversary activities, but there wasn't any money that came with that. That just expanded the boundaries so that they would be eligible to apply for any federal type of assistance around national historic parks and things like that. So there wasn't any money associated with the designation. It just expanded those 7, the boundary to include those 7 houses, including the one that the city owns.
Okay, because what I've suggested to them is to get back with French Hill and Tom Cotton with the money. Thank you.
Director Wyrick.
In Otter Creek, we had an apartment complex that was zoned in 1980 to go in, and they have started, they have taken all the trees out. They actually broke into undisturbed buffer, and they're supposed to come back and plant some trees. I'd like to know when those trees are going to be planted. But the other part of it is they seem to be working a lot of hours that are disrupting the neighborhood. And this construction is right next door to, I don't know how many homes, but it's disruptive. And I'd like to know what the hours of work are for construction on the apartments for weekdays, Saturday and Sunday. I think Sunday it starts at 1 o'clock, but I don't know what the other days of the week are, and they're asking me because they think they're working outside of our normal hours.
Okay,
You're going to send that to me soon?
I will.
Because they're wanting to know now? Okay. All right, thank you.
Director Wright.
Yes, sir. Mr. Moore, the infrastructure improvements, the widening of 630 in the area that impacts the University Park neighborhood, they had qualified for a barrier to be constructed there due to the road noise, but the neighborhood voted not to install that solid barrier, which would basically have been a wall. And they're wanting to know, is there any way that we can liaison with the highway department to see if they could just have some decorative trees planted along there as a buffer? I'd appreciate if staff would ask the highway department if they could facilitate that. I mean, it'd be a whole lot cheaper than building a wall. But they definitely do not want the wall.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Director Hendricks.
I'll be short. I wanted to let Mr. Moore know I did get this invitation, but out at the school, Southwest. But I think I'm ahead of you all. Poor and that bunch, we all met at Dunbar. So I've been through all of this, except we didn't have a luncheon.
All right. Very good. Is there anything else? If not, thank you very much.